My name is Wieland. I'm a member of the Human-Computer Interaction Group at the University of Konstanz, and one of our research topics is interaction in augmented reality with handheld devices and mixed reality collaboration in general. And today I'm glad to present to you our paper with the title Separation, Composition or Hybrid, comparing collaborative 3D object manipulation techniques for handheld augmented reality. And I do this on behalf of my co-authors, who are Zagermann, Jens Müller and Reiterer. We want to dive into the topic with some video footage showing IKEA's AR furnishing app Place that motivates our work very well. By using this handheld AR app, customers can get an idea of whether the furniture will fit in their homes before they actually buy it. Additionally, they can easily try out it at different locations. And as shown in the video, this involves rotating and moving virtual objects through one's home. But given the fact that furnishing a place is a task that people often do collaboratively, it's quite astonishing that IKEA's app is only a single user application. The reason for that may be the conflict that arises if two or even more users want to manipulate the same object at the same time. So as long as only one person manipulates an object, there is no problem. The inputs can be directly applied. But what happens if a second user also wants to manipulate the same object at the same time? How can you combine users' actions that may have different directions or even magnitudes? From our literature research, we derived 3 different techniques to solve this conflict. And these techniques are separation, composition, and hybrid. And with these techniques, we implemented a collaborative variant of IKEA's AR furnishing app and then used this app to compare the 3 techniques in a user study. And on the following slides, I will now shortly explain our techniques. The first one, separation, solves the conflict by separating the manipulation tasks, rotation and positioning between the users. This means while one user rotates the object, the other one can only position it. And of course, this also works simultaneously since users are manipulating mutually exclusive degrees of freedom of the object. Our second technique, composition, only allows users to perform the same manipulation task simultaneously, and a merge policy, in our case the sum, is then used to combine their inputs. If both users, for example, move the object by 20 centimeters into the same direction, with the sum as merge policy, the object is then moved by 40 centimeters into that direction. This also works if users move the object towards different directions. An example on the slide, the user in blue moves the object by 40 centimeters towards the Z direction, and the user in red by the same distance towards the X direction. Using the sum as the merge policy, this results in a movement of 57 centimeters towards the diagonal. Here another example for rotations. If the user in blue rotates the object by 45 degrees counterclockwise and the user in red by 20 degrees clockwise, this results in a counterclockwise rotation of 25 degrees. Our third technique, hybrid, is basically the combination of the other 2 techniques. Here users can perform any manipulation task at any time, and depending on their input, the app switches between the other 2 approaches. If both perform the same manipulation task, composition is used. And if they perform different manipulation tasks, of course, then separation is used. We investigated these 3 techniques for handheld AR devices since they are the most prevalent devices to date, and also most of the related works focused on different device classes. For example, the work of Augmented et al., which investigated projection-based virtual environments, as you can see in the images on the left. Additionally, our analysis of related work revealed also partly contrasting results. While Augmented et al. Conclude that users are more accurate with the implementation of composition than with the implementation of separation, Grandi et al. Report that for their implementation of hybrid, the technique's accuracy increased with user specialization on different manipulation tasks, which eventually corresponds to separation and therefore is in contrast with the results by Aguirre. With our work, we therefore wanted to answer the question which of the three techniques a handheld AR application should use to enable users to collaboratively furnish a room with digital furniture. To answer this question, we conducted a controlled lab experiment during which we tasked dyads to collaboratively furnish one of our labs with 7 virtual pieces of furniture. And as you can see in the video, they did this as a docking task, since the target positions and rotations of the pieces of furniture were predefined by the yellow virtual masking tape on the floor. For our study we recruited 48 participants, which means we had 24 dyads. And since we recruited them as dyads, the members of each dyad already knew each other before the study. The participants were mainly students from different disciplines and between 18 and 40 years old. We decided on a within subjects design, which means that each dyad worked with all 3 techniques in a counterbalanced order. For each technique, participants had a short training phase and then completed the actual task twice. We decided for these 2 consecutive passes per technique to identify intended learning effects within each condition. For the study, we subdivided our general research question into 3 more specific ones. At first, performance. How do the techniques differ in accuracy and task completion time? And we operationalized this question over position error, rotation error, and task completion time. Second, workload. How do the techniques differ in subjectively perceived workload? And here we used the NESA TLX to measure subjective workload. Third, participation. How do the techniques relate with users' participation? And to operationalize this question, we calculated the participation score as proposed by related work. And finally, user experience. Which technique do users prefer? And here we let the participants rank the conditions, performed a concluding interview, and additionally used the user experience questionnaire. Structured by the research questions, I will now shortly summarize the findings of our experiment. Thereby I won't detail on position and rotation error and on the participation scores, since there were no significant differences between the techniques for these measures. And due to time restrictions, I will also leave out the results of the UAQ, since they are well reflected in the subjective ranking and the statements we collected in the concluding interview. Let's start with the findings related to the performance of the 3 techniques. Here in the first pass, task completion times for separation and hybrid were significantly lower than for composition. This slightly changed in the second pass. Here participants still were significantly faster with separation compared to composition. However, we were not able to find a significant difference between hybrid and composition. An explanation for that can be found when we compare the passes with each other. Here it showed that for separation and composition, participants were significantly faster in the second pass, which means that there was no learning effect for hybrid between the passes. Next we'll have a look at the findings of the NESA TLX, which we used to operationalize the technique's workload. And here participants perceived significantly less workload with separation compared to composition. Finally, let's have a look at the findings for user experience. Here on the slide we have the results of the subjective ranking, and as you can see, participants ranked separation and hybrid significantly better than composition. This ranking was also reflected in participants' statements during the concluding interview. Here we have an overview of the advantages and disadvantages participants mentioned. And for the condition separation, participants mainly valued the clear division of work. But on the other hand, they also said that this work division restricted them in their freedom of action. Regarding composition, participants mainly complained about the sum as merge policy, which caused unpredictable target overshooting. For hybrid, participants positively mentioned the freedom of action this technique provides. However, they also said that this freedom of action entailed the possibility of hindering each other. Yeah, summarizing, we can say that the results do not speak clearly in favor of one condition. Regarding task completion time and subjective workload, the study results suggest using separation since participants performed better while perceiving less workload with this technique. However, participants' preferences were polarized between separation's clear division of work and hybrid's freedom of action. And with that, our findings imply choosing the approach depending on scenario and task. So if time is the decisive factor, we suggest using separation. And if the focus lies on user experience, we suggest using hybrid. Yeah, and with this I would like to end my talk, and I'm happy to answer your questions now.